Have you ever felt like music from a few decades ago just had more life to it? And that so many of today's hits, even though they're cranked up to 11, somehow feel weirdly flat? I promise, it's not just your imagination. For the better part of the last 30 years, a secret war over volume has been raging in the music industry. And the biggest casualty? The music itself. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on why louder isn't better, and I'll prove what your ears have been missing. To really get this, we have to face a simple truth about our brains. We're biologically wired to think that louder is better. It's a neat psychoacoustic trick. When you hear something at a higher volume, your brain automatically perceives it as clearer, more powerful, and just plain more exciting. It's like an instant gratification button for our ears. And this isn't just a theory. It's a tool used in practically every recording studio. A producer can play a track for an artist, maybe tweak a few things that don't do much, and then play it back just a single decibel louder. Almost every single time, the artist will say, "That's it. It sounds so much better." That tiny volume boost creates a powerful illusion of improvement. For a long time, this was a pretty harmless part of the creative process. A little deceptive, sure, but no big deal. But what happens when that little trick stops being a trick and becomes the only goal? What happens when an entire industry decides that louder isn't just an improvement, but a requirement for survival? You get a war, the Loudness War. A race to the top that has quietly sabotaging the very soul of the music we love. This Loudness War didn't just pop up overnight. Its roots actually go back to the days of vinyl and jukeboxes. Record labels knew that if their song was just a little bit louder than the one that played before it, it would grab the listener's attention. But vinyl had physical limitations. If you cut a groove too loud, the needle could literally jump right off the record. There was a built-in safety net. Then, in the 1980s, the compact disc showed up. The CD, being a digital format, didn't have those physical guardrails. It had a hard digital ceiling, an absolute maximum level, and for the first time, producers could see exactly where that ceiling was. So the race was on. What started as a friendly competition turned into an all-out arms race. Producers and mastering engineers started using aggressive audio compression to squash their tracks, pushing them closer and closer to that digital ceiling. The thinking was simple. If your album is louder than everyone else's on the shelf, it'd sound more impressive in the store and on the radio. This escalated through the 90s and hit a crazy peak in the mid-2000s. We started getting albums so relentlessly loud, they were audibly distorted. The most infamous example is Metallica's 2008 album, Death Magnetic. Fans and critics complained that the album was so squashed, it was physically tiring to listen to. This sparked a huge backlash and finally brought the Loudness Wars into the mainstream conversation. The battle for volume had finally pushed things too far. So what was actually being sacrificed in this quest for pure loudness? The answer is one crucial concept: dynamic range. Dynamic range is simply the difference between the quietest and loudest parts of a song. Think about it like storytelling. A great story isn't just someone shouting at you for 10 minutes. It has whispers, moments of quiet tension, conversational parts, and then those big, powerful emotional peaks. Those ups and downs are what create emotional impact and keep you hooked. Music is the exact same. Dynamic range gives music its life, its emotion, and its punch. To make a track louder without its loudest moments distorting, engineers use tools like compression and limiters. These tools basically turn down the loudest parts, the crack of the snare, the punch of a kick drum, the peak of a vocal, and then let the engineer turn up the whole track. The result? The quiet parts become almost as loud as the loud parts. You can actually see this happen to the music's waveform. A healthy dynamic track from the 70s or 80s looks like a mountain range, full of peaks and valleys. But a modern track that's been a victim of the Loudness War often looks like a solid brick. It's a technique literally called brick walling, because the waveform is just smashed flat against the digital ceiling. And when you do that, you lose everything. Subtle details get buried, the space between instruments disappear, and worst of all, you lose the transients, that sharp initial tack of a sound, like the thwack of a drumstick hitting a snare. Those transients are what make music feel punchy. When you crush them, the music becomes flat, lifeless, and two-dimensional. It loses its power. Okay, I know this can all sound a little abstract, so let's put it to the test. This is the part where the whole louder is better lie completely falls apart. So we're going to listen to two different clips. First, here's a piece of music that's been heavily compressed and made loud. A perfect soldier in the Loudness War. Sounds pretty exciting, right? It's right in your face and demands attention. Now here's the exact same piece of music, but this time with its full natural dynamic range. It might have sounded a bit less intense. It was definitely quieter. Your brain, after years of listening to hyper-compressed music, might even prefer that first version. But here's the reveal, the real test. I'm going to play both versions again, But this time, I'll match them so the exact same listening level. First, the crushed loud version. And now the dynamic version at the same perceived volume. Hear the difference? As soon as you take away the volume advantage, that louder track suddenly sounds weak, flat, and almost broken. The punch of the drums is gone, replaced by a dull thud. The mix feels cluttered and lacks any real clarity. The second dynamic version, though, now it sounds powerful, clear, and full of life. You can feel the kick drum. You can hear the snap of the snare. There's space and depth. It just grooves. There's this aha moment. This is the energy and emotion that has been systematically stripped from music for decades. The damage from the Loudness War isn't just about sound quality. It's physical and mental. This leads to something called listener fatigue. You know that feeling of exhaustion or even anxiety you get after listening to music for a while? When you love a song, but after a few listens back to back, you just have to turn it off? It's not just your ears getting tired, it's your brain being overworked. With dynamic music, the quiet moments act as little rest periods for your ears and brain. But when you listen at a brick wall track, your brain is bombarded with a constant, unrelenting wall of sound at maximum intensity. There's no breaks, no release. Your brain has to work overtime just to process it all, which leads to mental exhaustion. In some cases, constant exposure to loud, compressed audio can even contribute to hearing damage like tinnitus. Music is supposed to be a source of joy and release, not stress and exhaustion. By chasing loudness, the industry started making music that, in many cases, is physically difficult to enjoy. For years, it felt like the Loudness War would never end. But then, an unlikely hero emerged: streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. These platforms had a problem. They needed to create a smooth listening experience where you aren't constantly reaching for the volume knob between songs. To fix this, they introduced something called loudness normalization. Here's how it works. Each platform has a target loudness level. This is measured in a unit called LUFS, which is just a fancy way of measuring loudness that mimics how our ears actually hear. As of 2025, Spotify's target is around -14 LUFS, and Apple Music's around -16 LUFS. If you upload a song that's mastered way louder than that, say a brick wall track at -8 LUFS, the platform doesn't play it back at that level. It simply turns it down to match its -14 LUFS target. Let that sink in for a second. The entire motivation for the Loudness War, to be louder than the next song, is now totally obsolete. All that compression, all that sacrifice of punch and dynamics for a few extra decibels is now pointless. Your super loud, crushed master just gets turned down by Spotify and ends up playing at the same perceived level as a quiet, dynamic jazz track. And worse, because it's been so heavily squashed, it will actually sound weaker and more lifeless than the dynamic track. The war is over, and loudness lost. So what does this all mean for us? For listeners, it means you now have the tools to understand your own experience. That feeling that some music is just more engaging and less tiring to listen to. That's the power of dynamics. You can now actively seek out artists and producers who care more about sound quality than sheer volume. And for all the creators out there, musicians, producers, and engineers, the message is clearer than ever. Stop fighting a war that's already over. Aiming for the maximum loudness is a fool's errand. The new guard is to make music that sounds incredible at the normalized levels of streaming platforms. Focus on punch, clarity, and emotion. That is what will make music stand out in a playlist, not a few extra decibels that are just going to get erased anyway. Music isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about having the most to say. By embracing dynamics, we let music breathe, hit harder, and connect with us in a much deeper, more emotional level. Now that you're in on the secret of the Loudness War, I'd love to hear from you. What's a song that you think has amazing, powerful dynamics? Or what's an album you feel is a total victim of being too loud? Drop your examples in the comments below. I'm really curious to see what you come up with. And if you found this video interesting, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks for watching.